Good morning, everyone, here from Finland. And we are continuing with our work on Shamballa. We have a wonderful topical compilation which goes through all the books and pulls out the Shamballa references. And there's much on the will as well. Now, it will take really years to do this. But okay, we have something like 760 pages to go, and we're on page 4 or page 5, something like that. Before we begin our work, I would just like to think about the condition of humanity for a moment, and how there is a definite challenge from the counter force, which seeks to stop or at least delay the proper entry into the Aquarian age. And this may be a task over which the 3 Buddhas of activity, who are so much at the head of the triangle's work, and the Lords of Liberation, we can name them in a way, liberty, equality, and fraternity, that they will have some interest in if we evoke them, well, first invoke them properly. So by using great invocation number 2, we are invoking these great beings to add their wisdom and their power to the condition in which we find ourselves, battling the counterforce which is supporting the dweller on the threshold of humanity, and the angel of the presence of humanity, which naturally we want to identify with and we want to support. This battle will be intense, at least until the great conclave occurs. And since the Piscean age is fading out, and this aspect of the 6th ray age is fading out, I don't see any reason why the battle will not continue as the forces for Pisces and the 6th ray become more desperate, seeing their world slip away. Well, it's natural, it happens at the end of every age, and there's a turbulent transitional age, but this time we're also at the end of a 250,000 year cycle, according to occultism anyway, of our solar system and other allied solar systems in the orbit around the Pleiades, if we can understand it in the usual way. And we are at a transitional time, much more current, where we will see a 25,000 year age of Pisces give way within, who knows exactly when, maybe a few centuries, maybe less, to a 25,000 year age of Aquarius. So the times are unusually turbulent. And, maybe it's in the words of St. Paul, the whole creation groaneth and travaileth, awaiting the arrival of the sons of God. And here we have the anticipation of the hierarchy emerging again at this time because humanity is in more desperate straits than it can presently imagine, being so ignorant of what is really happening. So with those few thoughts in mind, let us together sound great invocation number 2. Let the Lords of Liberation issue forth. Let them bring succor to the sons of men. Let the rider from the secret place come forth, and coming save. Come forth, O mighty one. Let the souls of men awaken to the light, and may they stand with massed intent. Let the fiat of the Lord go forth. The end of woe has come. Come forth, O mighty one. The hour of service of the saving force has now arrived. Let it be spread abroad, O mighty one. Let light and love and power and death fulfill the purpose of the coming one. The will to save is here. The love to carry forth the work is widely spread abroad. The active aid of those who know the truth is also here. Come forth, O mighty one, and blend these three. Construct a great defending wall. The rule of evil now must end. Oh. Yeah. The activate of all who know the truth. I like to say it accurately. Well, you can see we're living in important transitional times, and every one of us doing our little bit can aid in this process of humanity's correct entrance into the impending equinoctial age of Aquarius, and then maybe somehow when we become more proficient in the planetary astrology, we'll learn when the greater age of Aquarius is coming in. But it is imminent. We know that the age of Aquarius, the 2160-year age, or sometimes conventionalized as the 2500-year age, is accompanied by a cycle of the seventh ray, which lasts as long as the age lasts. At least I believe it does. And we'll have to see, we don't know whether that greater age of 25,000 years approximately, a Platonic year in Aquarius, will be accompanied by, let's say, a huge seventh ray cycle. We don't know. But if analogy holds, then of course it is possible. We're reading from The Destiny of the Nations. And I actually, I just want to say hi to you, and welcome you that you are here, and Veronica and Annette and Catherine and Kristranka and Greg and Joe, Karen and Mariana, Martine and Miro and Natnia and Nicole, Risto and Tia and Zenaidi. Well, I see we have the European group and the South Pacific group, and maybe a couple of brave souls from the United States who are staying up late. But when these programs occur in such a way that you cannot receive them except to wake up in the wee hours of the middle of the night, and that can, well, some people do, and that's great, but it can affect your health, of course. So we do have the opportunity, don't we, to listen to them later as they are to be recorded. Okay, well, some maybe in the United States, they're pretty good, yeah. On the West Coast, not too bad, right? And we get to the East Coast, and let's see. Right, Greg, okay. Now he says here, the true first-rate personality who works in response to this Shamballa influence will have the ultimate good of the group deeply enshrined in his consciousness and heart. Now, it's interesting that he uses the word personality, and I mentioned this before, because basically with the kind of people we're going to be talking about, they are the first-rate souls. But the power of the first-rate soul will oftentimes come into the personality. So you may have your personality ray of a certain type, and the soul ray will overlay that personality expression, and for better or for worse, express through the personality. The word persona has to do with a mask, which is in front of the true individual. I think, it was used in the Greek theater, and the actors spoke through a mask, which was not their real self. But the real self of these people that we're calling disciples of Shamballa, he'll get into that in a little bit. The real disciples of Shamballa are at this time on the first ray in their soul. Alice Bailey was a first-rate personality, and so are many, but they were disciples of hierarchy because they had the second-ray soul. And so that's something to keep in mind when an unusual word crops up. Anyway, there are people who have a great open heart. And, Abraham Lincoln, when I look at him, with malice towards none and charity for all, the the second inaugural address at the end of the Civil War, binding up the nation's wounds. It's not every president nor every elected official that can speak with such depth, and I would say to a large extent as a kind of initiate, I would say in his case, speaking from his second ray monad through his first ray soul, through his second ray personality. So we find a lot of that second ray in his case, of course, strengthened by what ends up being a monadic subray, namely the first ray soul. Just to say that the ray of the soul is a subray of the monadic ray, but on the monadic level itself, those 7 types of monads are also sub-rays up on the monadic levels of the major ray of the monad, 1, 2, or 3 on the logoic plane. So get that structure in mind. And, you know, when our conference is coming up and we're going to have in the Advancing 7-Ray Seminar, we're going to have kind of a synthesis look at our entire ray structure. And a new booklet is coming out called the Tara. It's been around for a while, but okay, now it's going to be a booklet, and it will cover your higher rays if you are interested in trying to assess what they are. But anyway, this the true first ray personality that has the soul ray on the first ray working through the personality will have the ultimate good of the group deeply enshrined in his consciousness and heart. He will think in terms of the whole and not of the part. And you know how it is with first-rate people. They love the big picture, and they don't want to get caught in too many details which prevent their proper executive action. This is the thing which he will endeavor to impress, and there's no better impressor than the first ray, you know. What's that word that, well, I can't think of it at the moment, but it has to do with making an impact, okay? This is the thing which he will endeavor to impress upon the racial consciousness. Now, it can have unfortunate results, and some very interesting planetary karma resulted in the case that he's going to talk about here. This may lead at times to ruthlessness and cruelty. If the personality of the individual is not yet controlled, see, there we go, right? The personality controlled by soul impulse. You see, that first ray can come through the personality, but like I said, for better or for worse, the personality will adapt to it properly, and there will be still the soul vibration, which is essentially the vibration of love wisdom, or it can just come through and make a very ruthless personality. And it says such cases can frequently be seen. Then he goes back to the Old Testament time, which has so much karma for us today, and was a lot, was involved very much in the karma that was involved the Jews and the Germans in the last World War, an old family war, an old family fight, as it were, from two groups that had a lot in common. It says an instance of this can be noted in the history of the Jews as found in the Old Testament. I mean, there it's documented. When the first ray was in control and passing through one of its rare cycles of activity, and we don't know exactly what type of cycle he's talking about, because generally 1 year, 10 years, 100 years, 1,000 years, 10,000, 100,000, all of these are first ray cycles. So which is the duration of the cycle that he's talking about? We read that they butchered and slaughtered all their enemies. You know, looking for the promised land from the previous solar system, there was a certain arrogance that was developed, a certain kind of mental pride coming in on the first and third ray, slaughtered all their enemies, men, women, and children, putting them to the sword. And this is an important statement that is being said here. The sword is ever the symbol of first ray force, just as the pen is the second ray influence, or now, you know, any writing implement, the computer and so forth. Well, now who's involved in that? Well, the Master Jesus was involved. The Master Moria was involved. The Master Moria, from all evidence that we can gather, and from some intuition and from some discussion with those who know something about the subject, was the great individual Moses. And Jesus was Joshua, the great general. And they together, Moses not entering the so-called promised land, but Joshua basically leading the entire attack. And we have that in the discussion of the crumbling of the walls of Jericho, one of those cities that they took over completely and acted in the manner that is here discussed. And there are others, you know, who were with also the Jewish or Hebrew group. I think Master R was one of them, you know, sort of coming from the previous solar system and wandering in the present solar system and on our planet, and there, even present, says the Tibetan, before individualization took place on our planet. So there is, I'm leaving out some of the characters that are involved. I do believe St. Paul of Tarsus, was another one that had tremendous effect in the Christian dispensation. And all of that is the attempt to make up for various things that are karmically instigated by some of this very, very aggressive first ray behavior. The soul of Judea is on the first ray. So we have to remember that. And now more and more of the second ray will be coming in. If you look at the horoscope of the now Master Chohan Jesus, the best horoscope I've seen is the Sun in Capricorn with Virgo, the second ray love wisdom sign rising. So more of the love wisdom, of course, is coming in here, and maybe some kind of fourth ray monad involving a bridge. You know how fourth rays always bridge between this and that, involving a bridge between the previous major solar system and our present major solar system. So even now, what's going on in the Middle East is still a tale, a kind of effect of this original aggression. And in Atlantean times, there were other things that he says, I won't even bother to tell you, you won't believe me. and they accounted for the devastation of so many people at the cruel hands of the Axis powers during the Second World War. So we can see that the Tibetan is a great planetary historian, and he gave a lot of information to Madame Blavatsky, who seems to have had some kind of third ray in her system, as well as the first ray soul, and she wrote it down and elaborated all of this with the stanzas of Xian, which I guess were translated by Master Kutumi in the way that he wanted them to be presented. So there's a lot we don't know about where we came from. Maybe some of us came from that earlier solar system. Maybe some from the moon chain. Those are the two greater possibilities. And we've been involved in karma that is working itself out now, and we hardly know the origin of it, but we will. Okay. So that's just kind of a little story there about how the first ray can be incredibly ruthless unless it is co-joined, as in the case of Lincoln, as in the case of Roosevelt, with the, and maybe Ataturk as well, he'll deal with that, unless it is co-joined with the second ray of love, wisdom. I wish to remind you, says the Tibetan. Let me get my bracket. You know, I'm always hunting for brackets. I wish to remind you, I use the word energy in reference to the spiritual expression of any ray, and the word force to denote the use to which men make of spiritual, to denote the use to which men make of spiritual energy as they seek to employ it, and usually, as yet, misapply it. So, you know, sometimes he really does use this very distinctive dichotomy, energy and force, and other times he does not. But at the moment, he's specifying the use of energy as of spiritual inclination. Whoop, that's not going to do, is it? So, and force of oftentimes personal, selfish, and just incorrect application of that same energy. Okay. So I'm going to make those stand out a little bit. So we'll have the distinction, energy and force. Now, you know, we have to really ask ourselves, we do have a personal will, you and I. And when we have applied it, has the soul been in back of it? Or have our own selfish desires been the motivating force behind the application of the personal will? And, you know, so many, I don't know if you're like I am, but so many things come back to me that I really wish I had done differently. You know, swept by some kind of current at the moment and not really thinking ahead in line with the soul. And at a point in my life when I knew less about the soul, but even now, I wish I had done it differently. Well, that's the way reincarnation will come to our aid, because we'll always have the chance to, apparently, we'll always have the chance to correct the misapplications of will from the past. And if you will read the integration formula for the first ray, you will see what happens to this first ray soul individual when he suddenly is hit by the vision of all he has done amiss and how he calls for second ray virtues to come in and help him. I cannot stand alone. I cannot work alone, you know. So he's been that trailblazer working with his own little ego, getting what he wants. And then the realization comes. So we can hope that, you know, the really advanced first-rate people have had that realization. And others are just bullying their way through life according to the dictates of their lower ego. You see that so often with military takeovers and I want to run the country and so forth. And the true democracy is set aside and people do not get their will expressed. But anyway, go to Esoteric Psychology 2, where he is studying the technique of integration for the first ray. And you will see the light that shocks, it's called, the kind of realization that comes upon the first ray type when they really see all the destruction that they have wrought. Okay, going on. I would point out that Ataturk, and he does use the word dictator, the Turkish dictator, within certain personality limitations of a relatively negligible moment, I guess, you know, alcohol was a problem, women were a problem for him. Anyway, but he calls these a relatively negligible, made good use of the first ray energy. And only the testimony of future historical records will indicate fully how wisely, sanely, and disinterestedly he used this type of force for the attainment of first ray objectives. Well, you know, Christianity and Islam in their present forms have so much of the sixth ray. And after you push forward on the first ray, you're liable to get a backlash. And that is what has happened in Turkey. We have first ray leaders, but they're definitely committed to a sixth ray vision, which Ataturk most definitely was not. You know, so maybe if you're interested in the what he calls the disinterested, wise, sane use of the Shamballa force or Shamballa energy, notice that he is using the word energy again, then maybe study his life and what he tried to do. It seems a shame that so many of his developments, progressive developments, were set back. But I think that's only temporary, and that his influence will prevail, just the way the influence of Confucius, more on the seventh ray, I think, will prevail in China, we are told, with his, you know, the reappearance of Confucius, as we are told will happen, and he will create in China, as a member of the hierarchy, a disturbance. And the disturbance is of small moment from the view of the soul, but can be, he tells us, DK tells us, appalling from the short-term vision of the personality. So let's see, the hierarchy has its plans. So it might be apposite here to point out that such first-ray exponents of force, sometimes I think that force is what I would call a specifically applied energy, a strongly directed, applied energy. That such first-ray exponents of force are often misunderstood and hated. Now, that's whether they're doing good or ill. You know, there are some first-ray exponents of the Shamballa force which have done terrible things and maybe are repulsed justifiably. But on the other hand, even when you try to do good and you change things and you change the old traditions and you have people rely more upon themselves and upon the new, you can be misunderstood and hated as well. So often misunderstood and hated. They may and do misuse the energy available, but they also use it constructively within the desired limits of the immediate plan. And I think it would be, you know, I'm not on the first ray particularly, but I think it would be an interesting kind of search to look throughout history for those that one thinks applied the first ray in a constructive manner, in a plan-aligned manner. Now, we often refer, you know, to Lincoln and to Roosevelt, and I suppose that, you know, Churchill has to be put in there, and maybe Charlemagne has to be put in there, and Akbar, who held a great court of synthetic understanding, but he was the former Master Moria. He has to be put there. Of course, Akbar also did some very cruel things as well, and the Tibetan does not spare him when he lists those who have interrupted the flow of civilization through their aggressions. It's interesting, you know, because he knows, the Tibetan knows who he was. Akbar was Master Moria, and yet he lists him among those conquerors that has not necessarily had a good outer effect. The inner effect of his court and the synthesis of religions and so forth, I think, was very good. But, you know, you come to other conquerors like Alexander the Great and Caesar and Attila the Hun, you know, these people have not entered so much the soul realm, and they're doing it for the greater glory of their nation, which they identify with and which is their own greater glory. So those are perhaps more common examples of those who misuse the Shamballa force. Anyway, they may and often do misuse the energy available to them, but they also use it constructively within the desired limits of the immediate plan. I mean, where, you know, where are you going to put Stalin? It's in between, isn't it? Where are you going to put Franco? Again, in between. These are not, there is great ruthlessness there, and also something not quite totally egotistical. But, you know, history has to make up its mind in the spiritual light about some of these disciples of Shamballa. I would like to state, he says, that the lot of a first-ray disciple is hard and difficult. There are, and here's he gets into it, there are disciples of Shamballa, just as there are disciples of the hierarchy. And this is a fact, hitherto not recognized, and never as yet referred to in the current writings on occult subjects. I mean, you know, so many of us are on the second ray and prefer what we consider to be the more gentle, milder, less disruptive, buffering effects of the second ray hierarchy to this kind of drastic, sweep it all aside, level the playing ground attitude of Shamballa, which clears the way, you know. So going on, it is wise and valuable to remember this. So we have to be grateful to the Tibetan for introducing much about Shamballa that, well, it just hasn't been there. If you look at the theosophical presentation, even before the Tibetan, it's not there. It's more about the path of probation, and the real dynamics of Shamballa are not given. Okay, well, they're not going to be given, but even enough about it for us to understand that there are disciples of Shamballa. They are powerful, these disciples of Shamballa. And of course, you know, right away, it's really easy to fall into certain glamours around this. I have, you know, had friends and associates and fellow occultists and all of that over my experience. They just insist that they are first-ray monads, which of course the probability against that is very high. There are some, I think one or two in the Tibetans group, and they didn't succeed really, were first-ray monads. But really what's going on there is that for all of their insistence of being a first-ray monad, it ends up being a glamour, because what they really are is first-ray personalities who are forcing the issue. And because of their self-centeredness and things they have not overcome, insist on being at the top of the heap, which is the so-called first-ray monad. So I sometimes am a little cautious about the so-called glamour of the first-ray monad. The real probability, except in a few instances, which can be probably confirmed, and those instances do not necessarily show out as a violent kind of aggressive first ray in the personal worlds, not yet, that the greater likelihood is the third ray or the second ray in the monadic nature. But then again, there's all these sub-rays, you know, and it is possible that those things can be concluded or included. Master DK said it was not really safe to release the pure first-ray type into humanity at this time, because the destruction would be so great. You know, you can look for that in Esoteric Psychology, Volume 1, right around page 26, where he says there are no real first-ray, pure first-ray types, which must mean, you know, it's kind of all up and down the ray chart. And in my view, it's a glamour to think of oneself in that way. But anyway, they are powerful, these disciples of Shamballa, headstrong, It's their own way and often cruel. The word I was looking for before was imposition. That's that first ray word. He doesn't always say that imposition is a bad thing. He tells us when looking at the fifth seed group that it can be a noble thing to be a source of imposition of the will of God. So it just depends on whether that imposition occurs with a necessary amount of love and consideration of the greatest good of the greatest number. Headstrong and often cruel. They impose their will and dictate, note this, their desires. We're talking personally here of many who, they're not talking about imposing the divine will or the dictates of the higher type of love. It's their own desires and their own will that so many fall into. They make mistakes. I guess all of us, we're in school here and we're not going to have 100% on every test, right? They make mistakes, but they are nevertheless true disciples of Shamballa, which must mean that if they're not too bad and haven't veered off on the left-hand path entirely, they will correct themselves. They are nevertheless true disciples of Shamballa and are working with the will of God, as much as disciples and the masters of the hierarchy are working with the love of God. And I would just say for people like ourselves, our next step is working with the love of God and the wisdom of God. That's the proper way to reach the Shambhalic will eventually. We know of what the Tibetan eventually called Hitler and his evil gang. And we know that they bypassed the love aspect entirely and were able somehow to evoke the very destructive side of the Shambhala force. And we saw, what it led to, the deaths of so many and the destruction of Germany and the destruction of Japan, and Italy was less implicated, he tells us, and nowhere near as bad or falling under the same obsessive conditions as the other two. So anyway, DK tells us, this is a hard saying for some of you, but your failure to recognize this truth and to respond to it does not affect the issue. It simply makes your individual lot and difficulties harder. So I guess he's asking us to recognize that hated, detested, and repelled as they may be, there are disciples of Shamballa. And we have to assess the world condition by looking around and seeing who these might be. Now, that doesn't mean that every political leader is a disciple of Shamballa, far from it. Somewhere here in the Destiny of the Nations, he tells us that the people who tend to get involved in political work are largely on the first ray, the sixth ray, and the seventh ray. And sometimes when I've looked at some of the characters involved, I even wonder whether the second ray, albeit modified by the first, is not a big part of their expression. But anyway, he gives rays 1, 6, and 7 as politically offering political opportunity, and people are inclined. Well, we've certainly seen easily 1 and 6. We've seen that. And when it comes to ray 7, you know, these people are holding the line with the law. So we can understand that ray 7 as a more detailed, more concretized reflection of ray 1 is involved in the political work and its associated fields. He goes on, I would remind you that the use of first ray energy inevitably means destruction in the early stages, but fusion and blending in the later and final results. I mean, a lot of us really hate to see our favorite attachments swept aside. One can understand that. You know, one has based one's life upon a certain sense of values and upon certain kind of attachments, certain loves, and along comes this first ray energy and said, well, that was fine for then, but we don't want to fall into a definition of evil called the good that should have been outlived. So we sweep it aside, and people really resent that because they are attached, and therein comes the Buddha with his essential statement, let go, you know. Easy to say, but very, 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 very hard to accomplish. If you study the nations of the world today from this angle, you will see this Shamballa energy of will pouring out potently through the agency of certain great outstanding, again, personalities. He's using that word in a general sense as a noteworthy figure, and not necessarily, you know, this is the personality ray and so forth. These are outstanding individuals, and that's what I just want to put down. The Lord of Shamballa, Sanat Kumara, and all the other names he has, the Lord of Shamballa is, in this time of urgency, from love of the life aspect and from understanding of the plan, as well as from love of humanity. Look how love is mentioned here, in relation to the great sacrifice. The Lord of Venusian love is sending forth this dynamic energy. Now, there may be specific Shamballa impacts of 1825 and the year 1975 and the year 2000. But all along, the Shamballa energy has been growing stronger and stronger. And as I said before, the great decision every 49 years is releasing Shamballa energy into humanity, and the results are often very transformative and some would say destructive and full of change, which is good for the future. But this Lord of Shamballa, look what he has. He has, from love of the, there are several things going on here. Urgency, love of the life aspect, and understanding of the plan, as well as, it looks like, secondarily, love of humanity. So all of these are the motives of that great Lord. is sending forth this dynamic energy. It is form destroying, even though in a certain way, the great first ray energy can be form reinforcing. So you have a real grounded vehicle under Vulcan to accept these powerful energies. But at first, it's going to be destructive. It is form destroying and brings death to those material forms and organized bodies which hinder the free expression of the life of God. Things are in the way. That's why these lords of darkness are called lords of obstruction. For they negate the new culture and render inactive the seeds of the coming civilization. Now, just think of it for a minute. What do you see? What of this nature has been, in your opinion, destroyed? Think of it for a moment. What has been destroyed, which is of a hindering nature? Well, maybe each one of us is going to come up with different things. I certainly see that the rigid caste system, which began in India and, well, maybe earlier, but certainly was prominent in India and was transported into other countries in terms of privileged and non-privileged social classes, walls of prejudice. Remember, it's the interior human being, not the outer human being, that shows the true nature of the elevation of the human being. So all of these outer race-related distinctions seem to me in process of destruction. Maybe you would come up with something that you find as being destroyed. Oligarchies are on their way, I think. Right now, the super rich are getting more super rich, and the impoverished more impoverished, although there is some correction, it seems, coming, and there will be a great correction. See, we're moving into the 6th sub-race of the 5th root race. We've been in 5 sub 5. Now we're going into 5 sub 6, and before another, or after another 2,000 years, we'll be at the very beginnings of the 6th root race, which will be, if I can use the word, amalgamative, which means fusing, coming together. Even the racial form at a certain point, maybe some millions of years forward, will be golden in color uniformly, he tells us. So, that those outer distinctions, which were so prominent in terms of the law of cleavage, which has to do with the 5th ray, will be substituted for, there will be a substitution with regard to them of a uniformly golden race, all part of the 6th root race and part of the Buddhic energy. So those, in other words, the great heresy of separateness is the tremendous heresy, which is keeping humanity at odds with itself and preventing real progress. Now, those artificial boundaries, I mean, there are some boundaries which are correct, you know. In occultism, the first degree initiate can't get into the third degree ceremony and all that under Hermeticism. But now we're talking about humanity on the outer plane, and those separations are going to be destroyed. And maybe you're thinking of other things too. I'm going to relent here a short time, and then we'll take up your questions and your comments. From this display of energy, unthinking humanity, and boy, have we ever seen examples of that recently, draw back in fear and likes it not. When full of personality hate and self-will, human beings seek often to turn this energy to their own selfish ends. And that we've seen in the war and in many wars. We've seen selfish people wield this. If human beings, even the best of them, were not so undeveloped and so superficial in their judgments and their vision, they would be able to penetrate behind what is going on in the key countries of the world, and see the gradual emergence of new and better conditions and the passing away of the loved. Now that's the problem there, but slowly decaying forms. Now that's the problem. Think of it. Now I've got to. I don't almost hate to tell you, but there's this grisly example of a lady whose husband died. Okay, he died. And he was lying there in the bed when he died. And she kept him there for 1 month until it just, became impossible for many reasons that you can imagine. But, loved, but slowly decaying forms. Can you imagine hanging on to a form that you may have loved, but we don't have the penetration, the insight to see it's just an aggregation of atoms and not the true human being at all? Well, that's a horrible example, but there are a lot of people who are not too far from wanting to do that. Even the way that currently we bury people in the earth, we bury their bodies in the earth as if somehow we're hanging on to something when we could release them much more rapidly through cremation, as was practiced in the olden times. This has to be corrected so that we overcome what the Tibetan calls cemeteries, those psychically unhealthy places. The energy of Shamballa is, however, so new and so strange that it is hard for human beings to know it for what it is, the demonstration of the will of God in new and potent livingness. Okay. I just have the feeling that that has to be the end for today. Well, it is. It is the end. So let's see, where are we? I can't say what page because these are all extracts, but I can at least go back here and say, whoop, I can say that we're at the end of discussion number 3. which I will try to set up here. So this is the end. Actually, it's discussion number 4. And we are here on the 11th of March. And beginning, let's see now, if I can look at this, when the Shamballa hit again. It may be a while. But, you know, I think this compilation is available to you somehow on Makara. And it's going to be a little while before we get into Shamballa again. It looks like, gosh, I hope it's a long time. It'd be great to be able to do this every day, you know, but it's not, you know, you have to respect limitations, which I never have, but you have to respect them. And this is on the 8th of April, is our next Shamballa meeting in the PM. Only it's going to change to 5 p.m. GMT. So it's going to be 8th of April. It's a long time. We'll see what more we can do to make better progress. 5 p.m. But, you know, you can read yourselves as well. And, you know, just use this as a discussion to bring out other points. And let's see, okay, I have a problem. I'll just say discussion 5. I won't look for the number. All right. So that's what we've done today in terms of our reading. Very interesting about the characters who are the disciples of Shamballa, and the good and the bad, and the energy and the force, and the reaction of most human beings to shambolic types, and the fact that it's new information, that there are disciples of Shamballa. So this is an important paragraph. Now, my hope, let's see. And now I'm beginning to read from your comments. And if you want to speak, you can, gosh, I think I'm alone here. Raise your hand, and then hopefully I will see it. Hopefully. But anyway, reading is the easier way for me right now, because that I can see for sure. And I don't have any assistance at the moment. So here's Chris Tranca saying that after the release of the first ray during World War II, most of the power of the European monarchies disappeared. Yeah, and that is one actually, Chris. And you know, I think it is also connected with World War I. The monarchies were very strong then, before that war. And a matter of fact, it was a fight between monarchies in a certain sense, the Austro-Hungarian Empire and the Tsar and of Russia and others who had that kind of prominence. And he said, humanity would never have been able to go forward if conditions as they were before World War I had abided. Now, you know, it's a gradual release of this power. The Shamballa impacts, which are larger things, are listed as one in Lemuria for individualization and one in Atlantis for the Great War. There was also a volcanic destruction of Lemuria It's not listed as a Shamballa impact, but it certainly seems to carry that note. And then for a long time, once hierarchy went behind the scenes, there has been nothing of that sort. But suddenly, 1825, 1975, the year 2000, and all of the gradual, if not an impact, a gradual growing pressure from Shamballa during the warring century, the 20th century, the Great War from 1914 to 1945, has shown the attempt of Shamballa to reach humanity directly without so much buffering from the hierarchy, which is maybe the safer way, of course. So yeah, the European monarchies, which were, you know, pretty self-serving, and I think we have to include, you know, the Tsarist regime in Russia. Now we have constitutional monarchies, and somehow out of tradition, the monarchs are figureheads and are expected to do social service of various kinds, and they still stand for some kind of national vision, but they don't have the power. The people more and more have the power, or the politicians which emerge and want to deny people the power. Now, let's see what else here. And there's something, page 17 in DK. Yeah, yeah, that's it. But you know what? It keeps jumping though, Martine. When Zach put this together, he didn't just run down page after page. He looked for specific Shamballa references. So there's going to be, you know, a hop, skip, and a jump here. It's going to skip pages as we go. And this, but I certainly can put it down. But as I say, there will be jumps. All right, friends. Now, what would you like to ask or to propose or to say? Vera has her hand up. So let's see. How do I don't even know how I acknowledge that. Vera, can you just unmute yourself and speak?
Am I unmuted?
You're good. You are good.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I have my dilemma: glamour or illusion. I just feel that there is no justice actually for that. It seems like for there is a 10 commandments in the New Testament. Yeah, don't kill, love
Old
your
Testament.
neighbor like yourself.
Oh, okay.
And
The new commandments and the old ones, right? 10 commandments are the old ones, and there are new commandments, right?
Okay, so we should be nice to each other and love each other. Yet, like as you described today, the Shamballa disciples, they can, in the name of advancing the plan or ideology or something, they go and pillage and kill.
Yeah.
Put my
I've heard
mind
it.
at peace, please.
No, those are tough
It seems
things
like
to reckon with. Yeah.
little people are disposable.
Yes. It seems that way. And what did he say? I'm trying to find the reference. Here it is. This is the reference where he says, the use of the first ray energy inevitably means destruction in the early stages, but fusion and blending in the later and final stages. Now, do we have the faith that that is so? Have we seen that it is so? Or do we just feel that the little people are always ground under the heel, and that no good can ever come of it. See, that's our estimation. What do we think? And you know, you'd have to come up with examples. Now, I think this example of getting rid of the power of egotistical monarchies was a big one, because these countries were essentially ruled by king dictators. Now, you know, later dictators could emerge from the people as well,
Yeah.
but democracy is also generally, if you look at the trend and not the immediate present where it's challenged, democracy on the rise. And somewhere here, we're going to read it very soon, the people gaining their power, and that the will of God showing up or manifesting itself shows in the mass movements of the people demanding better conditions, which also is in process. So the question is, do we get stuck in our assessment of the cruelty of the immediate foreground, or are we able to penetrate into the possible developments that come from the clearing of the loved yet decaying forms? That's our question. And most people say, oh, it's just horrible, and they don't look ahead. What would you say to that?
Okay, I take it the global movements, but there is a need for continuation of vigilance is probably not the right word.
It's a good word. It's a good word.
Being on guard, that those people who are in power, be it being born into it, like some royal sort of thing, or being rich and famous, like you have now the elite, money elite, we still, because they are, the population needs to be organized as they are organized. The elite, I know they are not born, they are not aristocratic, the old sort of elites, but they are still doing pretty bad things. And we are, this is a war now, and it seems like we are more or less, the populations are sleeping.
Okay, well, that is a concern, and millions of people around the world are sleeping when it comes to mobilizing and organizing in the right way their own power. They can react in some kind of violent, emotional, instinctual way, but that's not going to lead anywhere. And now, you know, we come to the issue of meritocracy. Now, if you go back to Plato's Republic, the ruler that he had, you know, it was the so-called philosopher king. It all was an ascent through meritocracy. And we could say, okay, look, there have been women too who have fulfilled that kind of role. But the person was at the acme of the mountain of merit and had proven for 50 years or more that this person was an embodiment of virtue, wisdom, and so forth. So it was ruled by the wisest. Now, there's a lot about the leveling Aquarian energy, which fights against meritocracy. The so-called elite, you know, people that get a lot of money for doing what they do, they are appealing to the emotional body. I'm thinking especially of the, you know, the people in the entertainment business, the sports business. They make huge sums because, but what are they appealing to? They're appealing to the excitement of the physical, emotional nature. They are not making huge sums appealing to the mental nature. Even people like Elon Musk and Bill Gates and, you know, those fabulously Bezos, fabulously rich people, they are satisfying emotional cravings to have things, to go places, to, you know, to have the things that enhance the personality. Now, eventually, because humanity's not there yet, is it?
Yes.
With the people who will be the elite will have proven themselves to advance the mind and the soul. And that's what we have to work towards. Right now, richness and eliteness are not necessarily a signal of inner soul development, it
Yes.
seems to me.
Yeah.
Yeah. And also, you know, there's the envy factor. You know, we got to really watch out for that. The envy factor, um, where people who have less resent the people who have more just because they have more. And, you know, Christ gave us a statement: the rich and the poor you shall always have with you. Now, you know, maybe that's not too encouraging, but there is a way, using the money meditation and other things, to channel the resources towards truly ashramic creative endeavors. And all of us are trying to work on that too. Anything else, Vera?
It's so we know about the Jesus, Master Jesus, but do we know about the subsequent incarnations of before Master Moria, before he became Master Moria?
Well,
Because you did.
we know Moses is a great probability, at least in the people I've talked to who have thought about the subject. And that leaves them all with a lot of karma for the invasion of the so-called Holy Land. You know, he may have been Charlemagne, the Emperor Charlemagne as well. You know, he certainly focused as Akbar on uniting the religions. So we know Akbar is one. We know a certain, in Agni Yoga, Russell M. Russell, Russell, something like that, Russell M. And there he is in that painting called Christ in the Desert, where the Christ is a kind of more of a blonde-haired figure, drawing with his cane in the sand. And behind him is a dark figure that looks kind of Moria-esque, and that is Russo. And then going back further, King Solomon. Yes, Moria as King Solomon. And going back further, Moses. So those are the ones that I'm kind of attuned to. And I'm not sure about, you know, Moria comes from a princely family in India. And they say that for many of the masters, the form they now carry, not for all, but the form they now work through physically is the same form in which they took the fifth initiation.
Yeah.
So maybe we could trace that, you know, somewhat.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Interesting, I think. Okay, very good, Vera. I saw Joe, Joe Garso. Did you have your hand up?
I did.
Okay,
Can you
well,
hear me?
yeah, you bet I can. Yeah, go ahead. Joe.
Okay. Gosh, so much I could say, but I thought to mention that Chuck Schumer, who is the Democrat leader in our Senate, this evening was in tears as he told us how pleased he was that a bill had passed that would, for the first time in the United States, keep more than half of the children out of poverty. It's a huge thing that looks almost as big as Social Security in 1939. I
Yes,
guess
yes.
that's my preface of saying that I think the answer for me, and take it in terms of, I am a Scorpio, so I'm very familiar with Pluto and Ray 1.
Yes.
Yeah, I've always had this goal of wanting to empower others. And when I think about the people that I know, I've puzzled over, why are all of these people being violent on one side and others of us going the other direction? Why this huge split? And the best thing I could come up with was, we're all looking for a way to use our voices for empowerment. That's the underlying motivation, I suspect, even though some of it is incredibly negative and very disturbing to me. So I keep looking at, what's that common denominator? How do we move forward? And for me, the answer, I guess I'll stop right there. It's
Yeah.
much of what you said when you were summing things up. I do believe that there is a whole movement. The Shamballa movement, for example, is saying, I believe, that more and more people empowered will be able to make determinations that will move us all forward.
Thanks, Joe. Yeah, look, you all can put your video on if you want to now. We're having a discussion. This is a complex issue. It has a lot to do with the degree of evolution that different groups have experienced and what they mean by empowerment. See, for some, is it the power of will, the power of love, the power of intelligence, whatever it is, power of beauty, going down the list, power of technology, power of the ideal, power of magic, the empowerment can mean different things to different people. Let's just say there is an aspect of the will. It comes second in order. There's the will to create, and then the will to fulfillment, and the will that conquers death. And now these are discussed in esoteric astrology at the end, and it's this will to fulfillment, which is a Leonian type of will and relates to the rounding out of Jupiter and the effect of the second ray, which so many people are looking for. They just want to be able to live a fulfilled life that is not deprived, you see. And but they have different skills in searching for that. Now, and that is according to their level of evolution. Some choose personality violence because the chakras below the diaphragm are the most activated, and the heart is not open as a group organ in the way it will be later, bringing in an inclusive energy. Now, basically in the United States, where a lot of this is going on, you have a bunch of second-ray souls and a bunch of sixth-ray souls. And there is a difference in the amount of time they've been evolving according to when they came into incarnation. Let's just say that either the second-ray souls have made better use of their opportunities and have been able to switch off the rays of attribute 4, 5, 6, 7 onto one of the rays of aspect, 1, 2, or 3. And then you have the people who have not yet made that switch from attribute to aspect, and they just look at things differently. And that's the battle. They reinforce what they know, which is the the personality which they identify with, okay? And others are, you know, they have their weaknesses too and all that, but they see a more inclusive picture and have been through much of the attributive qualities and are now into the rays of aspect. It's a very occult origin to this split. And the question is that eventually it is the rays of aspect that will overcome eventually. The question is how much delay, how much starting again, how much pain, you know, all that, that's up to us. That's going to be up to us.
Yeah.
So anyway, you know, yeah. But, you know, you have a lot of experience and you've seen a lot of things. And so, you know, we reach the age of synthesis where we try to put our life picture together, you know, in anticipation of what may come next. So we're trying to do that. When we talk Shamballa, we are talking about a synthetic vision, something that's very, very big and inclusive and that we're not used to dealing with, okay? But we're going to improve with all of that for sure. And these, let's see, the ray of humanity is the second ray, basically, on the soul level. It tells us that in the glamour world problem, it gives you the rays of humanity for the Piscean age, second ray soul. It gives you the rays of humanity for the Aquarian age. All the other rays change, second ray soul stays. So this transition from the warring fourth ray of humanity into the second ray is on its way. And then we're going to see inclusion, inclusiveness, instead of this constant friction and division. And we know it's like night and day what the former occupant of the White House was attempting to do in his crude, selfish Martian methods, and what the present, more compassionate president is attempting to do with Chuck Schumer and those kinds of people that really are looking out for the welfare of others, in my view. You know, I consider myself to be an independent person when it comes to voting, but, you know, there's no question in my mind who represents the second ray in humanity and in the United States, and who represents the still limited sixth ray idealism. Yeah, that's my view of it. Anyway, yeah, nice to see you.
Thank you.
Yeah, you bet. Okay, other thoughts or questions from anybody that you may want to bring up, or writings or things of that nature? And here's Greg. Let's see, what do we got here? Well, we have a few things. Okay, we have a few things. Well, as long as I'm on, Greg. Yeah, okay. Let me, Greg, let me get back to my let me come to you as I go down this list, and then we'll get you. Your mom wants to speak on something, so that's fine. Chris Tronka, I think it's also important to look at things from a higher level, like, say, the Mahachoha. Now, if we could only do that, huh? 6th degree initiate, okay. Example, China first ray took over Tibet, and which released a huge outpouring of incredible Tibetan teaching, yeah, to the world, which might not have happened as China takeover. Is it a bad thing or good? What if it's, what does it look like from the perspective of the plan? Well, okay, well, probably the masters have their own view of that, but, you know, when you are studying the new esoteric schools, in Letters on Occult Meditation, page 299 and following, you see that one of the most advanced schools of all is listed as Western China. Now, obviously, Western China is Tibet. And apparently the Tibetan back in 1920 was foreseeing that Tibet would be considered part of China eventually, and that when the days of the new occult schools, new esoteric schools of meditation would occur, that it would be considered as part of that great country, China. So there's, you know, there's eventualities and their methods. Now, you might say that, and maybe with justification, that the Tibetans were holding back too much, which was meant for the edification of humanity. They just kept it too secret. You know, there is a strong Scorpio energy going on there in Tibet. It's obvious with their techniques of death and their emphasis on death and, you know, many things point to Scorpio. And maybe in the long run, some of this information, certainly not all yet, had to be released. So we don't know what it is from the point of view of the hierarchy. Obviously, there was a lot of violence, and it might have been karma, and some terrible things occurred, and much destruction, and maybe many precious things were destroyed. But overall, the Tibetan teaching was spread around the world. So it's a good point that you raise. Now, going on, destruction for future fusion of Mao Zedong. That too is possible. Obviously, he is a disciple of Shamballa. And he, I guess, you know, if you're looking for a body count, when these disciples of Shamballa come into power, Mao Zedong has the highest body count of all. The destruction of people's forms reached the peak with him. And he was, in many ways, a combination of the first and sixth ray. His idealism, the Little Red Book, the Cultural Revolution, the destruction of the Dharma as it was found in China, those are the bad things. But the secret traditions of China never could be completely destroyed by such an individual, even though he had no sympathy for them whatsoever. Obviously, in a way, one of the old reincarnated Chinese emperors, in my view, anyway. But look at China now and how it has changed. And of course, in many ways, its first ray soul and the application of that first ray force, or is it energy, has not changed. So we have an inscrutable man at the head of China right now. He really knows how to keep his cards close to his chest, you know. And but one sees by the developments in China that it's really moving into its first ray ascendancy. Now remember, Confucius will appear and cause a disturbance. And that may be the beginning of a better use of the first ray in China, and not a use that demands hegemony or superiority over other countries. as almost every strong nationalistic country has demanded for itself, whether it's Great Britain or the United States or China, you know, or in earlier days, France or Germany, you know, my nation overall. Well, that's not the way it can be, and it will fade. Now, going on. Thank you for this reading, says Mariana. It really helped me have trust for the Shamballa Ray concerning what is happening in Sweden, where the political stage is out of order and must fall. The Swedish people need to wake up before we give away the democracy for money and material things, before the love and light for human beings. Well, we're all being challenged when it comes to personal values versus spiritual values. This is the big battle today, and every country will see it. You know, Sweden has been a constitutional monarchy, with the royals of Sweden hopefully setting some kind of example, you know, and the royals of various countries now have to do that. Most of the drama has been in London. You don't see quite so much drama with Sweden and Denmark and other constitutional monarchies. You see a lot of service from some of those people. But yeah, when something's in the way of the coming Aquarian age, the pressure is now so great that it's going to be swept aside. Now, okay, so now we're up to Greg. Oh, she spoke, did she? Okay. I'm sorry, I didn't know who your mom was. No need to worry about her at this point. Okay, whatever, Greg, if it's needed, then that's fine. You know, we're having our usual, yeah,
If you
go
can
ahead.
hear me, the only thing I was thinking about was you should turn your thing down.
Was what?
We're echoing over here. Sorry. She has to turn her volume down.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, there we go. So the biggest thing that, I mean, the greatest learning that any one of us can really get, and probably why so many of us are incarnating on the planet at this time, is this battle that we're battling against the most difficult things. And there, that Pluto energy that comes through, that power combined with Vulcan and those things, they provide us an opportunity, but it's so hard to break through to get to that point where we can accept the opportunity. Every one of us probably that have any sense or experience about the first ray and its power are probably going to be very close on the disciples here, that we're all working with each other. But it's through the process, through the lessons, through the challenges, through the changes, through the hardships, that we can really grow. And it accelerates everything that we're learning. It accelerates our spiritual growth. It accelerates everything to a point where we can handle it, because, you know, there's always that saying, God won't give you more than what any one of us can handle. And so we come marching in as pioneering on this the beginnings of the sixth root race coming through. We pioneer in, we're going to run into conflicts. We're going to run into challenges, but that is the way to growth. That is the way to a much faster and more accelerated spiritual growth. And that's all I was going to say.
Yeah, I think is well put, Greg. And before the Lord Maitreya can reappear, Pluto and Vulcan have to do their work. It's, you know, it's page 70 and 71 of Esoteric Astrology. Before the first initiation, there's a great cleansing and imposition. The cleansing is the healing planet Pluto with the power of the serpent, the imposition, Vulcan. And that's going to cause a lot of disturbance, but let light and love and power and death fulfill the purpose of the coming one. The Kalki avatar, the rider on the white horse, the Christ. Those things have to cleanse humanity. And the fascinating thing that really struck me when I read it, when the Christ appears, or it's said every eye shall see him, although not necessarily recognize him, it will signal that what we mean by humanity taking the first initiation has occurred. So now we're in preparation for humanity taking the first initiation. And all of the Vulcanian and Plutonic effects are with us at this time. And it is Shamballa Energy, both Vulcan and Pluto, Aries, Pluto, Shamballa, and Vulcan, Taurus, and Shamballa. The Shamballa Energy is a steady pressure towards humanity, and what is going to be our attitude towards it? Well, if it's the attitude you described, it's good. And if it's the fear and terror and recoil and all that, well, then we'll just delay our own process. So I appreciate your thoughts on that. Thank you. And let's see, Karen, you asked to unmute, so go ahead.
Yes, Michael, I was thinking about the interview that Oprah did with Harry and Meghan recently. And I was pretty fascinated with it, even though I'm not that involved or fascinated with the monarchy. But in terms of what you just were talking about, certainly the race issue came up because of the concern about the color of the child. And, you talked about as we move into this new age in the 6 root race, there will be a blending and fusing of the races and the color issue will disappear. But it's such a big global issue, racism right now. And it's just interesting how it's playing out and also related to the future of the monarchy in Great Britain,
Yeah, exactly. It's been quite, quite exclusive and class-based. In other words, the caste system has been kind of inherited with distortions from India, and it was a very class-conscious society. Well, gosh, that has really broken down, and it must as well, if there's going to be, a care for the people who are impoverished and denied opportunity and all the rest. I mean, you can't hold up racism at the highest idealistic level of the monarchy and still accomplish in your country any kind of empowerment of the people. So there'll be a lot of difficulty getting these different previously fifth ray divided groups to understand each other. But it's happening a lot in the United States, which is said to be a melting pot. And something about Russia, something similar there. So it's going to have its effect. And the blending will come with the recognition of what the soul is and not the outer form. Let's just say there are cultural differences. Maybe there are probably physical hereditary differences, of course, just the way the Eastern body and the Western body, DK tells us, require different approaches from the teacher. But all of that can be adjusted as long as we look at the real individual as the one behind the form. That's what we have to be able to do. Anything else, Karen?
No, thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much. I know how much you think about these things, and you can't escape the kind of Harry and Meghan interview, can you? And oh my God, the reactions to it. You know, people, newscasters storming off the set and insults flying and accusations flying. And I don't know, when I saw that sections of the interview, I thought it was all handled psychologically in a good way. I thought it was handled tactfully, and I thought the refusal to name names about the racism was a good thing. But the finger was pointed. And of course, I think Meghan Markle is a Leo. She is actually a strong person. But, it brought up the whole suicide issue of all things. You would never expect that in the kind of interview. Nobody was knowing. And it brings up the fact that there can be cruelty and still politeness at the same time. But, they were complimentary of the Queen. And, as she said, the Queen has been wonderful to me, she said. So basically, here's a 93-year-old woman who has seen so much, and she obviously deserves great respect, So, but the poor monarchy has just suffered over 30 or 40 years, 30 years maybe, with all of these intrusions of the real world. So, obviously things are changing. Now, more. There's a bit more here. So let's see. So Chris is saying that I recently read that the Chinese government was actually thinking to reinstitute Confucianism as a way to combat the growing selfishness and materialism. That's interesting. I had not read that. And of course, what it means is that particular member of the hierarchy that we know as Confucius is drawing closer. You know that hierarchy is going to do everything it can to help. But people like ourselves, we have to be alert to these changes, to these implications, to these little shifts which show things working in the right direction. In the arcane school, at the end of our meditation form, you always had to say whether you had identified any members of the new group of world servers and why. It's a good thing because we look for the good. Our news is mostly bad news. We get fixated on bad news and on conflict and all the rest of it. But to look at the number of people who are really thinking positively and making a subtle, quiet change is a very uplifting thing. So that's I consider that, Chris, good news. And Anna is saying, thank you. The rays of Leo and Aquarius are important to Shamballa impacts from self-centered, to group consciousness as response to the seventh and the first ray via humanity, the fourth kingdom. And exactly. Even with Leo, heights of noted service can be found in this sign. Speaking of Leo, is what he said. And when it comes to Aquarius, it is the climactic sign of the fifth initiation for the majority of people as they become true world servers. Anywhere, Aquarius is active from the second to the fifth initiation very, very strongly. So, and Leo is its counterpart. Leo has that first ray shambolic quality, but It is the second of the fire signs. And because it's the second of the fire signs, it has a strong heart and love, wisdom emphasis also. So Aries is the most shambolic of the fire signs. Leo is hierarchical, but of course it has the first ray. And Sagittarius has more to do with humanity. They all line up, and the great second ray, as well as the first ray, is coming through Leo, but for a different reason. Well, you know, if I get into the technicalities, there's a point in esoteric astrology where basically says, well, okay, the sun may veil Neptune for the esoteric rulership position. The sun may veil Uranus for the hierarchical rulership position, but also the sun may veil Jupiter in the sense of the ordinary position, the orthodox position. And that again ties Leo in with the second ray. And you know, and even Shamballa, if you really look at it, it's not an entirely first ray domain, because it is subsidiary to the influence of the great solar logos, who is just about exclusively on the second ray, especially in this solar system, though it may have a first ray personality in the next solar system, but still the soul is second ray, and probably eventually the monad, the highest monad for our solar logos, is second ray. So even Shamballa, part of which is located on the monadic plane, is carrying the second ray as well as the first ray, with Sanat Kumara being the highest example of the teaching ray on our planet, and also the great sacrifice, and the Lord of Venusian love, and 40 other names that we can go over at some time. Anyway, Aries and Aquarius, very important. Excuse me, Leo and Aquarius, very important for the coming age, the age of Aquarius, Leo. Okay. Is there anybody else that wishes to speak or to write something? Because we're pretty much now at the end of our work together, pretty much at the end of our work for this morning. Tonight will be, what will we be doing tonight? I have to quickly take a look here on the big master schedule. Okay, that's April. And here's, I hope you know you do access this, because it's very useful. Obviously, some changes occur along the way. This is Thursday, and we're going to do the reappearance of the Christ tonight. You know, every week he tells us to do that. Tomorrow morning, we'll have a Zoom just like this one on the law of group progress and the laws of the soul, and basically the group life of the new group of world servers. And then in the evening, another Zoom work with glamour. And then comes our new moon. It says it starts here at 9:30, and the new moon is more like 10:20. So we'll have a little meditation on the new moon. We'll see about climate change on that day, but there will be an esoteric United Nations meeting. Oh my goodness, everything's happening at once. We'll have to look at that Saturday. Looks like the sun is entering. Is that possible? Sun entering into Aries. Well, if that is, there may be some revisions here because we always do.
Michael,
Yeah.
we have changed the EUN meeting to Sunday, 8 p.m., 7 p.m. GMT.
Okay, I guess I have the old one, right?
Yeah, this
So,
is the old one.
so Sunday, 7:30, is that it? Oh, that's good. Okay, that's good. And I think David Hopper has his
That's right. At the
uh,
time of the EUN meeting
yeah.
on Saturday.
Okay, that's good. Thank you, Anne. Appreciate that. Like I say, without all these experts surrounding me, I get totally lost. All right. And then it looks like the ingress is here. And it says the ingress occurs at 9:37. Ah, that's the next day, isn't it? I'm sorry. I went over the edge. The EUN meeting is on Sunday at 7:30 GMT. Is it, Anne? GMT?
That's right.
Yeah,
GMT PM.
Okay, I can't move this right now, but anyway, you'll know that because that will be on the weekly schedule, I assume. And is it on the weekly schedule?
Yes. Yes, it's on the weekly schedule, but it has not been sent out. That the correction of the time.
Okay.
So, well, yeah, I'm sending out soon.
Okay, we'll send out the correction. That'll be great. Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, and now let's see. Martine says reappearance, and well, that's the main story. That one word, the reappearance of the great Lord. That's the story that's going on our planet right now. Okay, friends, that's it for now. And I will had an interesting discussion, I think, and grateful that you have been here. And we'll work tomorrow morning on group work and reappearance of the Christ tonight. And that is a broadcast. And I'm not sure that Tuya will be at her destination to do that. And if not, I'll do it. So we'll be, one of us or both of us will be seeing you in another, I don't know, it'll be another 10 hours or so, something like that. Okay, lots of love and many blessings to everybody. And glad that you have been with us. So yeah, and Catherine's saying, yeah, it's important study for right now. I agree with you. Yeah, Catherine, I agree very much so. Yeah, thank you, everybody. Okay, and this will be BL, our colleague BL will put this up on the Makara, and Harold Moses, and also Joanne Waltz will put it up on the YouTube channel. We'll see you soon. Bye-bye.